Hello, everyone. Hopefully you could all hear me. Welcome, everyone, to the Technologent Nutanix webinar where we're talking about mastering the Broadcom transition. Just going to give it about another 30 seconds here before we get started, make sure everything's working, and, excited to be here. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So hi, everyone. My name is Raza Ali. I am the Director of Cloud and Automation here at Technologent. I also run our modern infrastructure practice. So I am here discussing the various implications and sort of the conversations around how we are partnering with Nutanix to help guide your enterprise strategy over the course of the next hour here. I have with me Avinash Shetty, who is the VP of Product Management from Nutanix, who's going to help talk a little bit more about the Nutanix piece. I'm going to start by going over just a little bit here about Technologent. Technologent is 22 years in the IT industry. It's amazing we've been here this long. When I started, it was about 15 years. I've been here 7. We are a certified women-owned business. We focus on global IT transformation, and we're really that solutions and services provider. We focus really heavily on Fortune 1000 companies. And my goal is to link with your business outcomes to drive business agility, to drive efficiency, and to drive productivity, transitioning IT away from being a cost center and helping you to partner with the business to understand and better drive your profitability and your company goals. So the number one thing as we've been walking through and as I've been having conversations over the last 6 to 12 months is, hey guys, what are you doing about Broadcom? And it's kind of a loaded question, right? Because obviously we partner with Broadcom and we've done lots of work with them. But in reality, right, the VMware acquisition has changed the way many individuals are viewing their larger enterprise footprint. So we're trying to understand, one, from an industry impact perspective, how does this affect you guys? How does this affect us? And how is this really changing the way customers view their overall IT strategy? And that's really the focus that we're working on. We've partnered with the likes of Nutanix to really help drive change and innovation within the customer environment, right? We've heard lots of things about, hey, my price is going up, or hey, I don't know if I can support the same solution I've had. And some of that is true. And, we're definitely looking into alternative solutions and really helping understand how we can help transition your business. But what this means for us as a larger sort of pivot point is to help you redefine your enterprise and help build that transition plan to say, let's really focus on our digital journey, on our transformations, and help understand from a large scale TCO perspective and from a larger corporate organization, how is it that we affect change and really help to drive the business to the future? So with that, we talk about the journey around the larger IT organization, right? Hopefully all of you have seen bits and pieces or understand these are really the 3 areas that we're focused on as a whole to try to drive unification across IT, right? And across technology stacks as a whole. Understanding that, in all of the conversations we've had, in all of the work we've been doing, it comes down to unification and really helping to simplify operations and management and observability of IT so that we can drive those next gen initiatives, things like Gen AI, things like really focusing on your IoT platforms, data governance and data management, and security, right? Understanding that we're protected against things like ransomware attacks and data exfiltration and everything else that exists. We're all being asked to do more with less. So how do we do that in the simplest and most optimized way? Our focus is using those unified tool sets and using our partners such as Nutanix and some of the others that are out there to really help drive organizational change and enterprise scalability to strengthen your footprint across the entire organization. So as we focus on enterprise optimization, how do we start this journey? And let's be realistic, right? This is a journey. This isn't something that we snap our fingers with, happens overnight, and all of a sudden organizations change and they work, right? Sometimes there's compelling events, and a lot of times, hopefully, we're being proactive and really understanding the changes that need to occur. So what are the areas we really focus on as we start this journey? Obviously, cost reduction is a big thing. I think as a whole, lots of our business partners are coming to us saying, we understand that we need more money to do this stuff, but let's figure out where we're wasting money. Let's figure out how we reduce that technical debt so that the spend we have is used in the right places. Let's focus on things like security. Let's focus on things like AI so that we can set ourselves apart as a business. Where that comes from is really improving your efficiency and improving the scalability, things like scale up and down and agile deployments and agile developments to try to help enable the business to move fast, fail fast, and go on to the next goal as we need it. And with that comes transparency, right? Understanding what we're doing as an IT organization and how the business is utilizing us so we can show our value. And let's be realistic here, right? All of us are looking at sustainability as we drive into those new AI conversations, as we see the power load, the electricity, the cooling load and things like that that are coming into our data centers. How do we reduce that footprint for what already exists so that we can properly utilize and optimize the space we have to hit those next generation initiatives and really focus on things that matter? How do we seamlessly use the public cloud and integrate it with the edge and unify those skill sets so that we can provide that value to our business? One of our major partners, guys, in this space is Nutanix, and I have Avinash with me, who's going to take over and share his screen and talk a little bit more about how they are driving innovation in this space and how we're partnered together to change the way we have this conversation.
Thank you, Raza. So I'll pick up where Raza left off, which is kind of, talking a little bit about change, right? And so we all understand the market dynamics that we're in. I don't have to educate the 130, 140 of you that are on this call in terms of all of the changes that are coming down the pike. I just kind of want to level set in terms of what we're seeing from a Nutanix perspective. And then I'll dive into sort of, how we're sort of helping our customers make that transition with all this change coming down the pike. So unless you're living under a rock, we all know about the Broadcom acquisition of VMware. And there's a lot of mixed emotions, right? Many of us have built our careers on VMware. We have a lot of technology expertise in this area. And honestly, the product is great, right? There's nothing wrong with VMware, the product. And if it wasn't for the Broadcom acquisition and the changes that Broadcom's making, most of the industry wouldn't be looking to migrate away from VMware. So that's the key part of the message. So in terms of digesting what's really changing for our customers, here's broad brushed 3 buckets into which I can classify what Broadcom's doing with the VMware acquisition. So first and foremost, they're basically changing the portfolio in terms of how they're going to market. So a whole bunch of new bundles and new pricing is out there. Raza kind of alluded to this in terms of price increases and stuff. In reality, what's really happening is they're taking a core set of products that they used to sell a la carte, and they're basically saying this is no longer available. A good example of that, I would say a vast majority of the customers that are currently on Nutanix, for instance, but running VMware ecosystems, run ESX, run VROps, and so on and so forth. And these products are no longer available as standalone offerings. Instead, the primary focus for Broadcom is to sell a new product bundle. Well, I shouldn't say new; it's always existed, called the VMware Cloud Foundation, or VCF. And for most customers, what that means is if I was just buying ESX, or if I was just buying the ESX plus VROps, I'm seeing anywhere between a 4 to 10x price increase, depending on the situation, to get to the whole VCF offering. On top of that, if you look at the way VCF has been designed, there's a whole bunch of add-ons on top of that. And I would argue some of these add-ons, for instance, are sort of less priority and not focused on the future of enterprises. A good example of that being, their DevOps environment with Tanzu and so on and so forth, which is not part of the core offering and instead an add-on. So I look at it as, customers basically see a 3 to 5x. Now they're getting a lot more for that 3 to 5x, but regardless, it's a 3 to 5x increase for them compared to where they were with a la carte offerings. The second part of this change is really around portfolio pruning. So in other words, a lot of the offerings that we know that VMware used to have in their old portfolio, Broadcom doesn't have as part of the new portfolio. So a good example of that is that the EUC division was spun off, and KKR purchased it. And so we're actually in very strong conversations with the KKR team to talk about certifying, Horizon View on Nutanix as an example. They no longer offer robo licenses. And so there's a ton of changes in terms of the broader go-to-market. And last but not least, if you're a partner like Technologent and other partners in the ecosystem, they basically had to redo their entire agreement with Broadcom because the VMware piece of the equation no longer exists. And so, what discounts partners had access to, what products partners had access to, and this is not just channel partners, but also ISV partners like Dell and so on and so forth. Their relationship with Broadcom has changed as a result of this. So these are the three broad brush changes. I think the key element of this is the very first one, which is the way they bundle and price and go to market in terms of their offering. And this is really where we think, most customers that are on this call are probably getting impacted. Now, what does this mean for you as a customer? Let's talk about, forget the change that Broadcom's making. What are your objectives over the next 3 to 5 years? So if you look forward and we talk to our customers, and Raza mentioned this as well, which is, hey, if I look at my strategic investments and where I'm basically looking at my spend over the next 3 to 5 years, it's not about keeping the lights on. It's not about VMware and so on and so forth. My key value in terms of where I'm driving to where the puck is going to be is things like enterprise AI, right? Things like Kubernetes and containerization and cloud native solutions in terms of how I want to basically build my infrastructure stack. And a key element of that could be sort of a hybrid cloud technology, right? Like, so some of that could be on-prem, some of that could be in the public cloud ecosystems, but I really need that mobility and ease of use of going between on-prem and public. But if I look back and if I look at what Broadcom's doing with VMware, there's a huge divide in terms of how data centers are designed today, right? The legacy 3-tier with compute, storage, network, all being disparate ecosystems. There's a huge divide in terms of, where I am right now to where I want to be as a business, right? Now, you could argue that the public cloud gives me a lot of these benefits, but at the same time, for cost reasons, governance reasons, so on and so forth, you might want to have sort of a multi hybrid cloud deployment. And as a result of that, how do you basically bridge this chasm that's dividing, what your key initiatives are going forward versus where you are right now? And for us, what we've been building is this migration from the legacy 3-tier to Nutanix over the last 10, 15 years, right? As long as Nutanix as a company has existed, we've been pitching this idea to modernize with ease, right? So for instance, a lot of our early customers were VMware customers that migrated onto Nutanix as the underlying platform and moving away from 3-tier, and then slowly made the transition to a full software-defined data center stack with Nutanix. And what we saw from our user conference that just happened this past a month ago at .next was really the shift where we're focusing on bringing those enterprise AI apps, bringing Kubernetes, and bringing the public cloud into sort of the foray of Nutanix. Okay, so for those of you who are new to Nutanix, I'm more than happy to spend some time kind of talking about how we're basically achieving this. But Nutanix becomes that stepping stone in terms of bridging the gap between what your initiatives are for the next 3 to 5 years versus what at the same time, like looking to get off of Broadcom and onto a modernized platform. So we help customers both bridge that gap in terms of the legacy, but also more importantly, give you that roadmap towards where you want to be in the future. Okay, so there's a ton of people on this call, and I don't want to make any assumptions of how many of you are familiar with Nutanix. So just a quick primer on Nutanix, kind of a look back, if you will. We as a company were founded in 2009. We've been shipping products since 2011. 2011, 2012, 2013 is when we won Best of VMworld. And part of that was because there was a greenfield workload that VMware had launched called VDI with Horizon View. And we actually were making these View deployments hugely successful. As if you remember back in the day when we had hybrid SaaS storage systems, They used to kind of buckle under the workload of VDI just because from a performance standpoint, absorbing those IOPS and so on and so forth was a huge challenge, versus Nutanix, even in a hybrid environment, could absorb all of that because of the distributed architecture. So we're a scale out technology. We basically horizontally scale as the customer scales the environment, and we don't have any degradation in performance as you do that, right? The modern cloud-like architecture. So if you're in AWS, Google, GCP, or Azure, that's exactly the kind of technology you'll see in their data centers. In 2015, the analyst community caught up to us and basically called us the leader in the HCI market segment. Today, the HCI MQ is pretty much mainstream, and so as a result doesn't exist. And they've been replaced by something called the distributed hybrid infrastructure Magic Quadrant. And again, Nutanix is probably the only on-prem vendor, with the exception of a few hyperscalers like AWS, Azure, and GCP, who are on the top right quadrant. So again, just showing you that we're basically a technology leader in this space, and we continue to evolve our portfolio. I should say VMware is also in that leader quadrant. So, that was prior to the acquisition of Broadcom. Since then, what we've done is continue to evolve our portfolio from a software-defined standpoint based on the evolving landscape of what market conditions as well as what customer demands were. So we extended our platform with a software-defined file server, a software-defined object store, slowly moved into the network stack, where we basically have microsegmentation capabilities within our platform. We also developed a hypervisor at this standpoint. We took open source KVM and sort of built enterprise features on top of that. We call that AHV within our ecosystem. And then from there, we saw that one way to control what customers were doing was running those enterprise applications on Nutanix, and really we needed to go upstack to the application layer. So we have our own DBMS solution, so we can actually take Oracle, SQL Server, Maria, Mongo, and actually do end-to-end lifecycle management of databases within our platform. Around 2019 is when the world was shifting towards Kubernetes. Very early days, people were still dabbling with Docker versus Kubernetes and so on and so forth. We kind of took a stab saying like Kubernetes is going to be the mainstay long term. And we actually launched our first Kubernetes platform in 2019. At the same time, the world was moving to public cloud ecosystems, and we launched our first extension of the Nutanix solution onto the public clouds with AWS, and followed that up with Azure in 2022. And then, again, to make that migration between on-prem and cloud easy, we had to basically create a whole bunch of virtual networking constructs, VPCs, VXLAN kind of concepts, if you will. And so we built all of that within our portfolio as well. And in 2023, again, as the landscape was changing with GPT coming to the forefront, we actually launched our first go-to-market with AI platforms. And we just refreshed that at .next with GPT-in-a-Box 2.0. So I can certainly spend some time talking about what we're doing in the world of AI with partners like Hugging Face and NVIDIA as well. Okay. So this chart is a little bit of a eyeful. So it's a architecture slide about the Nutanix stack in general. And I'll basically break that down into 3 layers. The very bottom layer, which I like to call the infrastructure layer, the middle layer, which I like to call the services layer, and the top layer, which is the management layer. So let's kind of dissect it and go layer by layer. So it becomes very obvious in terms of how we made some design choices in terms of our architecture. Okay. All right. So to build on it, the very bottom layer is like I said, the infrastructure layer of the stack. Okay. At the end of the day, every customer needs to run their infrastructure somewhere, right? Physical, on-prem, at the edge, in the public cloud, and so on and so forth. And the infrastructure layer requires some hardware, so we can call that Nutanix hardware, Dell hardware, HP, Cisco, you name the vendor, odds are there's a certified platform that runs Nutanix. And then that infrastructure, the hardware in itself is not going to basically provide you the infrastructure stack. So you need a software layer that glues all that hardware together. Okay. And that's what we at Nutanix call Nutanix Cloud Infrastructure. So as the name suggests, it is to build a cloud, a private cloud in this case. And it basically runs all of your infrastructure pieces for you. So what does infrastructure really mean? It means compute. It means storage, it means networking, it means disaster recovery, it means security, all of these pieces coming together. Okay. So at the end of the day, The way our architecture is designed is you have underlying server architecture, like a Lego-like building block, if you will, and then the Nutanix software that glues all that servers together with direct attached storage, if you will, on those servers. So the storage management and all is done by Nutanix effectively, and you name the enterprise feature, odds are it's basically part of the ecosystem. So, I mean, I'm not even going to mention things like compression, dedupe, and so on and so forth, but all of the data resiliency pieces, whether it's at a disk layer or at a node layer or a server layer or at a cloud layer or a data center layer. So we have all of those resiliency pieces from a storage standpoint built right into the software. As you'd expect from any enterprise-grade solution out there. From a compute standpoint, I mentioned that we have a built-in hypervisor. We support ESX today as a hypervisor. We support Hyper-V as a hypervisor, but the platform also comes with KVM or AHV, if you will, as a hypervisor that's built into the system. Really, all the enterprise features on any modern hypervisor that you expect is also part of that solution. And the best way to think about this is when you go to AWS or when you go to Azure, you just run your instances or your VMs. You don't think about the hypervisor. You don't sort of manage it actively or anything of the sort. And that's exactly the design choice that we at Nutanix have taken, right? So the hypervisor is baked in. You don't actually actively manage a hypervisor. It's almost transparent to you. What you focus on is VMs and containers.
Hey, Avinash, real quick. There's a question in the chat. He's asking if AHV supports connectivity into an external SAN.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the design choices that we made very early on at Nutanix is to say that, look, the fastest way for an HCI hypervisor to basically be resilient, be self-contained, was to not do any external storage. So today, our position is that HV does not connect to external storage. That is not, it kind of takes away the core value proposition of HCI if all the storage is being managed outside of that Nutanix cluster. A lot of the things that we do as far as upgrades, lifecycle management, storage management, data locality, and so on and so forth gets all lost if you're basically putting the storage on the other side of the network. So a lot of the core value proposition gets lost. That said, with the Broadcom acquisition, we have a ton of customers that have external storage. And so at .next, what we announced was our first foray into external storage with AHV connectivity, which was going to be the Dell PowerFlex connectivity. So we do have something in our roadmap. We're still looking out in our roadmap, so it's not here and now today. But Dell PowerFlex will be the first one. And we also alluded to the fact that we will do IP-based external storage connectivity going forward. Again, very much in our roadmap, not here and now. And the key element there being IP-based storage. And what that means is most of the modern SAN ecosystems today support IP-based connectivity. That could be NVMe over TCP or something to that effect. We're not going to go back and look at 20-year-old technology like fiber channel and so on and so forth. That's not sort of where our customers are. That's not, we think that's sort of a dying breed as far as the market segment is concerned. So that's not really where Nutanix is going to focus on. We're looking out the next 5 to 10 years, and we're saying where is the puck going rather than where the puck has been. So hopefully that answers the question. No external storage connectivity today, with IP-based external storage connectivity in the future. Okay, so that takes the compute side. On the networking side, as you'd expect from any modern day solution in the enterprise space, we have everything from microsegmentation capabilities, where we can do east-west firewalling directly. We can integrate with a lot of sort of third-party solutions like Palo Alto, like F5, like Cisco ACI, and so on and so forth, where that can actually manage the Nutanix ecosystem on the back end. We can also do virtual private networks or VPC constructs, no different from what you'd expect in public cloud environments. We also have the ability to do VXLAN or layer 2 extension between public cloud and private ecosystems, or between data centers, so that you don't have to re-IP and so on and so forth. And then we have full disaster recovery capabilities within our platform as well. So for instance, if you're doing asynchronous replication between sites, or synchronous replication between sites, or even near synchronous, depending on the workload's RPO, RTO needs. We have all those capabilities built right into the platform. From a security standpoint, a lot of focus. So Federal was one of our largest early customers, and as a result of that, we got a lot of security capabilities that most customers, or rather most vendors, forget about till very late in the game. We actually got them very early in the game. So everything from stick compliance to SED based encryption to software-based encryption to internal as well as external key management to FIPS certification to CAC card support, you name it. Odds are, we have the whole gamut of certifications as well as software and hardware-based encryption, security features built right into the platform. Okay, so again, think of this as your private cloud ecosystem. Now you can choose to run this really small at the edge locations, or you can run it, make it as large as you want at the data center locations. So that's essentially how the product's been designed. Now, if you think about what NCI does, it's basically a software that happens to run on underlying, certified hardware. And if you think about what the public cloud does, they do something very similar. So if you look at what AWS does, they just have different names for what their compute is called. They call that EC2. Their storage is called EBS. Their object store is called S3. But it's essentially the same thing. It's essentially software based on underlying hardware that they just happen to rack, stack, and cable inside their own data centers, right? So it's actually very synonymous to a public cloud deployment. And so what we did was to extend our solution to the public cloud. We actually take the servers that they've rack, stack, and cable and run, instead of running their software, we run Nutanix software in the public cloud environment. Now, we run the exact same software as Nutanix Cloud Infrastructure, or NCI, in the public cloud, and we just happen to call that Nutanix Cloud Clusters. So when you run the same software in the public cloud, we call it NC2 or Nutanix Cloud Clusters, and that's nothing but the NCI software running on AWS or Azure hardware, right? That's essentially the best way to describe it. So we have customers, for instance, that will run Nutanix NCI on premises, and they'll run Nutanix NC2 in the public cloud, and then basically seamlessly migrate workloads back and forth between private and public. Now, one of the key differences compared to competing vendors in the market is that we decided that the public cloud ecosystem is not going to be a managed service, because AWS already provides a managed service for the underlying hardware. Essentially, the software is going to be 100% portable between on-prem and public ecosystems. So you could buy your Nutanix licenses for on-prem, at a future date decide, hey, I want to move maybe 50% of this to the public cloud. And so you would spin up a Nutanix cluster in the public cloud and effectively move those licenses over to your public cloud ecosystems and migrate those workloads. So for a customer, they still manage the Nutanix ecosystem just like they do on-prem, but all the underlying hardware is managed by AWS or Azure as a service. So from a Nutanix perspective, you're not basically incurring any additional cost to moving to the public cloud. So that was one design choice. The other design choice is we wanted to make networking super easy in the public cloud. So what we do is, if you have an existing VPC on AWS or a VNet in Azure, we'll actually plug all or plumb everything from a software perspective directly into that environment. So as a customer, you don't have to now create a new silo inside your AWS or Azure environment. You actually have a Nutanix environment that's sitting right next to your S3 or your AWS EC2 instances, so you can kind of mix and match these workloads as needed. Now, if you choose to run them in a separate environment, you can do so, but the whole benefit is that, hey, I already have an AWS account, I already have security policies and other structures already defined. I just want a Nutanix environment inside of that so that I can seamlessly migrate workloads back and forth. Now, as far as use cases for NC2 are concerned, customers use that for anything from disaster recovery as a use case, to cloud bursting as a use case, to even running natively and consolidating data centers as a use case, or quote unquote lift and shift. So all of these use cases are very valid, and we can certainly provide references for different types of customers who fit that bill. Okay. Now, I won't talk about native public cloud, but a key architectural choice that we made was that this lower layer of the stack was designed in a way such that all of the upper layers can run in any one of these lower layer ecosystems. So as I get to the upper layers, just think of it as, any one of the upper layer ecosystems can run on NCI on premises, can run on Nutanix cloud clusters, or can run natively in the public cloud. And that's sort of the design choices that we made very early on, so that architecturally this makes a lot of sense in a true hybrid environment. Okay, I'll pause and see if there's any questions on chat that I can take right now before I keep going. Okay, Raza, I guess there are no questions, so I'll keep going. All right, so going to the second layer.
Actually, real quick, there was one particular question that Doug actually responded to in the chat, but I did want to make sure you heard it. Specifically, he was interested in feature parity between Flow and NSX, and some of the sort of differences and similarities.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So I think, so as far as feature parity is concerned, I will tell you that what we focused on is what customers were saying was priority for them, right? And what was priority for our customers was, as I mentioned, the ability to segment traffic from an east-west perspective. So in other words, I want to isolate a specific workload, and I don't want communication between different types of workload. So that was one. The second was, ideally, if I'm coming from a sort of a brownfield deployment, I don't want to basically have to redo a whole bunch of networks and network segmentation and VLAN creation and stuff. So if I have a flat network that is not segmented and I want to segment it, I want to basically be able to do that very seamlessly. And so that was another design choice in terms of how we designed it. And then third, customers wanted, like I said, an overlay network capabilities, so something like VXLAN capabilities. And the fourth distant thing was a VPC-like construct. And we have all of these built into the platform, okay? Now, what we don't have is anything layer 4 to layer 7. So we don't have a load balancer. We don't have an IPS, IDS device. Because I think there are vendors in the market who do a much better job sort of filling that space. So whether it's F5 for load balancing, whether it's Palo Alto for deep packet inspection and IPS, IDS, we can service chain these environments so that traffic coming in can go to a Palo Alto and then come to a Nutanix VM, and we will service chain this as part of the solution. So from our perspective, we chose what customers really want in the solution, and then just like everything in the Nutanix design philosophy, it was keeping it simple, right? How easily can I deploy this, versus a 40-page document that I need to read? So the approach we took was a policy-based approach. So you define your tags, you define your policies, and then once I tag a VM with a specific tag, all of the policies that apply to that tag automatically apply to that VM. And what that does is it creates day zero security right out of the box. So imagine, for example, I've created a policy for database VMs and I tag all my databases as databases. The minute I create a new database and tag it as database, automatically that policy for all databases applies to this new one, right? So I don't have to think about security as I'm deploying new VMs. The security administrators think about security. The VM administrators think about just creating VMs, and security policies automatically apply. And that's what usually gets lost in data centers, because between configuring ACLs, VLANs, segmentation of traffic, and security, that's what takes time to deploy these applications over and over, and that's why you have users complaining that, hey, I asked for a VM and it's taken 4 weeks and I still don't have it, right? So we're taking all of that process out of the equation by basically making it a very policy-driven approach. I know that was a little bit of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that answers the question. Again, we can do a follow-up meeting if required to really go into the bits and bytes of the differences between Flow and NSX. All right. So kind of going to the middle layer here in the interest of time. This is, like I said, what I like to call the services layer. So if you're on AWS, you can say, hey, I want a file server, I want an object store, I want a data lake service, I want RDS, and so on and so forth. And you have hundreds of services. So at Nutanix, we wanted to create a services layer where on the same underlying platform, I can check a box and now I have the service built right onto that platform, right? Again, software defined, not a bespoke piece of hardware that I need to go buy, procure, install, manage, a life cycle, et cetera, et cetera. So within our software defined stack, we have a software defined file server, we have a software defined object store. We call this Nutanix Unified Storage. And essentially, you come to the Nutanix user interface, which we call Prism. You check a box that says, I want to deploy a file server. You define your namespace, you define your shares, and right there, now you have a file server that's a scale out file server built on top of the same platform. If you want an object store, you pretty much do the same thing. Check a box saying, here's my object store. It's S3 compatible, so on and so forth. And now I have an object store on that platform. As I mentioned earlier, to really get control of enterprise applications, most customers run databases. And what we found is most customers patch their 5% of their most mission critical databases, and everything else is best effort. And what that does is creates huge exposure points within the customer's environment in terms of unpatched databases with equally mission critical data sitting on that. Worse, even if I don't have mission critical data sitting on that database, odds are if I don't have MSEG, an unpatched database is sitting right next to a patched database, but I now have a security vulnerability that I can basically get into this unpatched database, and then all the east-west firewall might be, disabled, and as a result, I now have access to other databases in my ecosystem that are mission critical. So the whole point is, how do you lifecycle manage and keep databases up to date? So everything from provisioning to security to lifecycle managing databases to copy data management to scrubbing for test and dev purposes, that entire ecosystem is what we do with our database service. Okay, so think RDS and what RDS does for Postgres, we do for Oracle. We do that for SQL Server, Mongo, Maria, Postgres. So all of these on-prem databases, we can do the entire end-to-end lifecycle management of them. Okay, and last but not least, from a expansion of this service ecosystem, we 2 years ago we launched, or a year and a half ago we launched this construct called Project Beacon, where we could take the plethora of open source community projects and bring them onto the Nutanix foray, where the Prism management console can extend into these open source constructs. So a good example of that could be Kafka, which is a well-known open source data lake platform, or Redis or Elastic. So all these open source projects could be brought on and managed through Prism, rather than having to basically have a separate installer, a separate management console, a separate lifecycle manager, and so on and so forth. Now, we're not, so what we're doing in this space, I'll talk about it when I come to the Kubernetes fleet management piece of the equation. Okay. Now the final layer, actually, Raza, any more questions on that middle layer that came up in the chat?
There was and I just realized I answered this in the wrong place. There was a question about support on other platforms, specifically Cisco UCS and Dell VxRail. Someone had mentioned there's a hardware compatibility list and they link to it. And I'm in the process of typing out that, there are partnerships with both Cisco and Dell, although specific platforms we'd have to go through the actual list to work through. If there's anything else you want to add to that, we can.
Not particularly. I mean, again, we have a wide variety of compatibility lists. Cisco UCS obviously is very much on that list as far as compatibility is concerned. The Dell VxRail is a little bit interesting in that because VxRail is it's not just a hardware platform. The VxRail comes with the VMware software piece. We do have customers where Dell has converted their VxRail platform to a regular Dell server platform so that Nutanix can run on that. From a Nutanix perspective, it is going to be supported as long as it meets the Nutanix compatibility list, which we find that most VxRail does. It really is going to boil down to support from Dell. And so this is where we've been working very closely with Dell in terms of getting that certification for a customer moving away from VMware and onto Nutanix to certify the VxRail platform. So it's not so much a Nutanix hurdle as much as it is a Dell hurdle to overcome.
And I can tell you from experience, we have actually it's essentially called cracking the via trail, where you rip it apart, you re-image all the nodes from scratch, and then you can deploy Nutanix on it. It's not a simple solution, but it is possible to do, assuming the hardware is sitting on the compatibility list and Dell approves.
Correct. All right, so the very last layer of the stack is what I like to call the management layer, right? So think about, so again, before I go there, both the middle layer and this top layer is supposed to be agnostic of the very bottom layer, right? Like I said, it should run on Nutanix, it should run on NC2, but it should also run natively in the public cloud. So when you look at the Nutanix sort of ecosystem and where we're going, and what we just announced at .next is this idea that you can take your files and objects and you can take the database management solution and run that natively in the public cloud, rather than rely on a server in the public cloud ecosystem kind of with NC2. So that's kind of, directionally where we're headed. Now, the top layer, like I said, is the management layer. And the key piece of the management layer that I want to focus on is what we call the Nutanix Cloud Manager. And again, this Cloud Manager is completely agnostic of the very bottom layer. So you can run the Cloud Manager against a Nutanix infrastructure. You can run it against a VMware infrastructure. You can run it against AWS, Azure, and so on and so forth. And the whole idea is that, there's 4 key elements to the Cloud Manager, and they're completely agnostic of that underlying layer. So the first key element of that is intelligent ops, right? So let's call this day 2 ops. And this is where we use a lot of AI, ML capabilities to really understand what you're doing with the infrastructure and then predict what the future might hold, right? So whether it's on AWS, whether it's on-prem, based on your usage patterns, based on seasonality, based on growth, based on acquisitions, whatever that ecosystem may be, we can predict by applying heuristics as to what the future state of that environment is going to be. We also do infrastructure level automation here and so on and so forth. So all of that is based into the intelligent ops piece. The second element within Cloud Manager is self-service, right? And we find an incredible amount of customers wanting to do automation orchestration within the platform. And so more and more with doing more with less, Raza, you were talking about doing more with less and sustainability and cost optimization. This is really where self-service is a key part of the element, right? So think about, a ticket comes in and the person's asking for a VM or, something more complicated, a full SQL Server deployment, right? That ticket comes in. Instead of a human going and reacting to that ticket kicks off a blueprint. The blueprint kicks off an automation, and it says, okay, where is this SQL Server deployment going to happen? It's going to happen on Nutanix. It's going to happen on VMware. Is it going to happen on AWS? Is it going to happen on Azure? And completely agnostic of the environment, that blueprint gets executed against this environment. Okay. So think about that from an end-to-end perspective, whether it's a portal that the customer, that the end user logs into and clicks a button and say, I want a LAMP stack or a SQL Server or just a single VM deployed, choose my environment, choose all the resources. Once somebody hits the approve button, it's off to the races in an automated self-service fashion. So that's really where, it's a cloud agnostic way of doing self-service across these multiple ecosystems. And when I say AWS and Azure, I don't mean Nutanix on AWS and Azure. I mean native public cloud, like an EC2 instance with an S3 backend or an RDS instance, whatever that may be, right? Now, when you're running in multiple ecosystems, whether you're running in AWS, Azure, and Nutanix and VMware, you need to know the cost of operating all of these ecosystems in a more holistic manner. And so this is where our cost optimization platform comes in. So we can look at the cost of running your virtual machines, containers on VMware. We can look at it on Nutanix. We can look at it in AWS. We can look at it in Azure. We can look at it in GCP and give you one consolidated standpoint. We can even, if you've tagged all your VMs, we can break that down by a department within your organization or a specific project within the organization. And then we can even go as far as doing things like chargeback, showback. One of the key elements is cost optimization. So we can also do, so let's assume you're on AWS and you're running a bunch of EC2 instances, S3 buckets, blah, blah, blah. And so what we can do is we can look at the cost of operating that, and we can make recommendations. We can say, hey, you're running these VMs or services as, this instance type, but actually based on your usage pattern, this other instance type may be better because you're actually going to save X dollars a month, multiply that by the number of instances that you're running, and there you have your cost savings. The worst thing you can do in the public cloud is leave stuff powered on and forget about it, right? And so that's another way to do cost optimization. So we can give you active usage reports and so on and so forth, and we can make recommendations in terms of shutting what needs to be shut down, what needs to be optimized further, and so on and so forth. So again, a whole bunch of cost analysis that goes into this. Budgeting can be done through this platform. Chargeback, showback can be done through this platform as well. And the last piece of the Cloud Manager offering is security and compliance. So as you can imagine, every business needs to be compliant. If you're in healthcare, you need to be HIPAA compliant. You might need to be PCI compliant, NIST compliant, and so on and so forth. And so imagine running these compliance checks across all of your hybrid cloud environment, right? That's Nutanix, that's VMware, that's AWS, that's Azure. I want to basically check my compliance in each and every cloud that I manage. And so, we have a tool that basically can kind of scan every environment and give you sort of a compliance report as a company or as a department, and really give you that sort of breakdown in terms of where you're passing versus where you're failing your compliance checks. Okay, so that's the key element of the cloud management solution. And again, completely cloud agnostic. Now, for all things Nutanix, what we wanted was a single entry point into all things Nutanix. And that's what we call Nutanix Central. So Nutanix Central is a cloud hosted service. Customer logs in, they can basically look at all of their licensing, support, open cases, and so on and so forth, but also consume all of our SaaS services through that single login. But the best part is we can then from there go to individual clusters and manage them as well. So if you're a worldwide deployment, global footprint, imagine a single login that's a cloud hosted login. And then from there, you can basically have a global footprint, unified IAM, centralized login, and centralized reporting, and so on and so forth. Now, currently, this is cloud hosted. We do have a roadmap to bring this on-prem because we recognize a lot of our customers also run dark sites. And for that reason, this will eventually become a software that can be installed as well. But today, this is a cloud hosted service. Now, the last thing I wanted to speak to is the Kubernetes fleet management piece, right? So most of you don't know this, but about 6 months ago, we acquired a company called Day2IQ. Many of the folks on the call would probably have never heard of Day2IQ, but before rebranding themselves as Day2IQ, they were Mesosphere. Mesosphere was very early containers, predating Kubernetes, and companies like Twitter and Airbnb actually were sort of customers of Mesos. When Kubernetes became the forefront, Mesosphere pivoted and switched from Mesos to Kubernetes and also rebranded as Day2IQ. Now, about 6 months ago, we acquired these assets. And as a result of that, we have a very, very strong play now when it comes to Kubernetes. So in other words, what we got from a technology standpoint is a full Kubernetes fleet manager, whether you're doing Kubernetes in one location or multiple locations, including AWS and Azure. If you're doing EKS or AKS and so on and so forth, you can just have a single management console that manages all of the fleet of Kubernetes that you're doing. What's also great about what we're calling Nutanix Kubernetes Platform, or NKP, is it also comes with the ecosystem of surrounding apps. Now, if I'm a developer and I'm creating a new application that's cloud native, I also need cost. I need security. I need networking. I need data lake services. So the solution comes with a fleet of about 30 or 40 open source projects that are all CNCF compliant. And you basically have this entire ecosystem accessible to your developer community. So if you're, a Kubernetes manager, you get this entire ecosystem of not just fleet management, but also the supporting app ecosystem for your developers to go build the next generation of cloud native applications out there. Okay. The last thing we wanted was really around how do you manage data for Kubernetes? Because as you think about virtual machines, over the years, we built things like snapshot, cloning, replication, disaster recovery. Who's doing all of this for Kubernetes? And that's essentially what we call the data services for Kubernetes, which was actually in the middle layer. That's a little grayed out right now. But the data services for Kubernetes part is really around data management for Kubernetes and providing all of those enterprise features that we know and love, that VMs have enjoyed for all these years, extending that to your Kubernetes environment as well. Okay, so that kind of rounds it out. That's essentially the whole Nutanix portfolio, sort of in a glance, if you will. Architecturally, it's designed to be hybrid multi-cloud. That's a design choice that we made very early on. I didn't talk about AI, but we at .next, we also launched our AI platform to run AI modules directly on top of Nutanix. So as you can see from the stack, we have the infrastructure stack, we have the Kubernetes stack, we have the files and object store, we have the database management. So all of these pieces are all going to be building blocks that you're going to need for any modern AI application. So all the infrastructure pieces are there. What we announced at .next was really around inferencing and inference moduling for all of the LLMs. So obviously, we're not in the business of creating LLMs. That's what companies like AWS, Google, Hugging Face, others all do. We're in the business of basically providing the infrastructure and the supporting ecosystem to basically make AI successful. So obviously, we're really strong in the infrastructure pieces. Where we're extending our platform is really around having the libraries of LLMs. So we announced a partnership with Hugging Face, which we're, I believe, the only online vendor that has a partnership with Hugging Face. So the entire Hugging Face library of LLMs is available to you. We also announced a partnership with NVIDIA, and their inferencing as well as LLM modules are available. So, and we're going to continue to extend this platform with our automation orchestration framework. We can actually have all of these deployments automated for you, such that you can just have your data scientists pointed at a platform and can start developing AI inferencing endpoints and so on and so forth. So that's directionally where we're headed. So there's a ton of more information coming out on this new platform that we just launched at .next. So again, directionally where you want to go, Kubernetes, AI, and cloud. We're basically building the platform that can support all of these different types of workloads on the Nutanix ecosystem. So with that, any final questions, Raza, that showed up at the end there?
I think we are okay on questions. There was one more on compliance, specifically based on what standards, and Doug did respond to that. So I think we're good. Charlie, if you have specific other points you want about compliance, please. He says he's good, so we're good there. I think we're good.
Perfect. So then let me turn it back to you, Raza.
All right, perfect. Thank you, everyone, for listening to that, and thank you, Avinash, for that very amazing, detailed explanation on all of what Nutanix has done and the challenges we're all facing. With that, guys, I want you guys and gals, I want everyone to hear and sort of know that we're here. We hear you. We know the challenges you're facing. You can see some of, and this is just a small portion of what we've encountered and what we're working towards as a group together to really try to strengthen and get to that next level, right? So what I encourage each and every one of you to do who's on this call is go back, look at your infrastructure, look at your business outcomes, and understand where is it we can help. There was a lot of questions in the chat, some privately, some publicly, about how do we leverage our existing hardware? How do we leverage our existing environments, our existing investments to potentially make a change? Do we have to do everything at once, or can we do this piece and parcel with parts of our business? Can we potentially move some of these workloads into public cloud? What does NC2 do? All of those are really interesting and really great questions, and I wish I could answer every single one of them in great detail, but of course we cannot, right? So what we would encourage and what we would really hope is, and I apologize, that's not supposed to say cost, that's supposed to say enterprise optimization. I forgot to change it. That is my fault. Go ahead and blame me. And really going and looking and doing an enterprise optimization. And we're here to help you, right? Reach out to your Technologent rep. We can talk about sort of the details in your specific situation. But guys, this is us coming in there and really understanding, how do we help you with your infrastructure? How do we help you with your journey? And let's build out that customized tool set and set of strategies. And then when we get to the point where we need to talk about actually implementing and changing and building out governance models, then we can talk about like large scale services, right? But you can see as we go across this from a services and from a from an optimization perspective, what we do is we start from an informed perspective. Let's get in there. Let's understand what it is you're doing, what it is you need help with, and what are your unique challenges. Spend an hour with me or one of my architects and really understand those challenges in detail and where can we help. Then we'll start talking about optimization, and then we'll start talking about operating overall as we work through it. Remember, this is a journey. This is not something that we're going to snap our fingers and change tomorrow. We want to really get your unique solutions, your unique situations, and help guide your journey to that end goal, to the point where we're doing the cool stuff like Gen AI, like large-scale fleet deployments and fleet management in Kubernetes, cloud-native applications, and next-gen technologies, because they're there and people are doing them. Let's do it together, and let us use our expertise to help you. With that, any last questions or concerns or anything else that anyone would like to bring up? And I apologize, I can't see the chat window with the way this is. So if you guys do see something, please feel free to pop it up or, speak up.
I think we're good, Raza.
Thank you. All right, with that, thank you everyone for your time. Thank you everyone for giving us an hour of your precious day. And, with next steps, please reach out to your Technologent account managers. They will of course be reaching out to you. We do have a recording of this coming out in the near future. And, of course, feel free to reach out to any of us that are on the call, and we're happy to get on and help with anything we can. Thank you so much, guys and gals.